Hi everyone. Before we dive into today's episode, we want to take a moment to acknowledge the sensitive nature of the topics we'll be discussing. Today we'll be exploring subjects related to cremation, embalming, and suicide. We understand that these topics can be difficult for some listeners, and we want to assure you that we approach these discussions with care, respect, and a commitment to providing accurate and helpful information.
Here we go.
Do it.
Okay, cool.
Here we go.
Welcome back for another week of Coffin Talkin. I'm your host, Holly. I'm here with Frank. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's good
How
to
are
be
you
back.
doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to see you too.
So, anything interesting in your life right now or no? Anything happening? Okay, let's just get started.
Yep, let's just dive right in. Riveting introduction.
That's fantastic. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that everything's working so well for our children.
Yeah, right. I really think I need to start prepping because I prep for like the actual portion of what we're going to be talking about, but I don't even consider what's going on in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Like what I should talk about at the beginning.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing to do. What about you? Were you prepared?
Yeah, I'm prepared.
Okay.
Yeah. When you're ready to start, I just want to give a disclaimer on this episode, so that
Great.
people understand and you understand why I'm going to do the disclaimer. And I just want to be able to do that so people aren't listening to the whole episode if some get offended easily.
Yeah, offended, or I'll add squeamish.
Squeamish. Yeah, there are a couple of girls that have actually listened to this podcast already. We're squeamish over a couple of the. I don't get it, but okay. Whatever.
Well, I would hope you don't get it.
No,
I hope you still don't get squeamish. Did you ever get squeamish?
I have never, ever been squeamish at blood. Never.
At blood. What about dead bodies?
No. Dead bodies either. I guess we should say
good.
cadavers. But yeah. So no, I've never had an issue of it. I have had instances where I've become extremely frightened, but nothing physical has ever bothered me.
Oh, okay. Huh. Well, that's probably good.
It is good.
There's probably a small percentage of people on the planet that don't get ever squeamish or creeped out. Mm. And those people are the ones that are destined to become morticians.
That's
so correct. You're fulfilling your role.
Oh my gosh. Let me write that one down.
This was fated for you.
No, so I will give you a little bit of an interesting stat since you've said that. In my class, going to Cypress College, there were 64 of us that started and only 23 graduated.
Really?
That's how, almost a third, 2/3 dropped out.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
Just because they thought, oh, this would be cool. And then they actually get to seeing what you're going to be doing. And they say, this is not cool.
I think they thought it was easy. And so,
oh, really?
And I think people get enamored with the thought of being in the presence of death. If I can make
it's very different.
You know what I'm talking about, right? There are some people that will thrive on just the very essence of being in the same room with someone that's passed away. But when they get to the work end of it, they don't like it.
Right. Interesting.
So, anything else?
No, not for me. Let's just dive in.
Let's go. So the disclaimer that I want to give before. Well, I'm going to tell you something before the disclaimer. What I want to say first off is when you're listening to these podcasts, please don't think that they happen the week the podcast is given. These stories are over 40 years, sometimes 50 years. I haven't been in the industry that long, but it's been a long time. And so please don't think that Frank is experiencing these week in, week out, week out. Yeah. Hello, I'm back.
I'm going crazy over here.
Oh my gosh. So the disclaimer actually comes to the reason why I want the disclaimer said here, and it was suggested that we do it, is because of the embalming process itself. So in this episode, we're going to talk about some of the embalming. And when I say the terminology embalming, what we're talking about is a chemical replacement of blood. So there are 14 different injection sites of the human body that you can actually raise vessels or arteries and inject that chemical fluid. Now, when I say chemical fluid, it's a formaldehyde-based fluid, and it is designed specifically to help sanitize and preserve a dead human body until services can be rendered. So I don't know if you've noticed or if you've gone to a viewing before where individuals, they want to hold the hand. That's fantastic. I love that. The second thing is the kiss. So when you kiss someone that has been deceased, if they are not properly embalmed or superficially or topically washed and sanitized, there is that possibility of transmission of disease, because once the body passes away, it immediately starts to break down. So it may take a long time for you to notice it, but the body is starting to break down. So I've been asked a number of times by families that call because their vacation is about to start. So they call, grandma's passed away, and so they say, how long can you hold her? How long would you think, Holly?
Comfortably 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay. So our refrigeration, in most refrigeration, is kept at about 38 degrees. And so we can comfortably hold an individual after they've passed away, depending upon how long it takes us to pick up the individual and bring them into our care, about a month. And so if they go on their vacation, come back and want to still have a service with them, the only thing I worry about is the dehydration of eyelids because they're thin. And the lips. So if the lips and the eyelids dehydrate, there are things we can do throughout the embalming process, but it's a little more challenging. So when you talk about the embalming, it's usually done through the carotid artery, which is just right under the clavicle or next to the clavicle. It's just above and medium or medial to the clavicle. That's where most men are embalmed from. Most women are embalmed from the femoral artery, which is in the leg. And why would we say that, Holly? Any ideas?
I don't know.
Wardrobe. So if a woman is used to wearing a tank top, a spaghetti strap shirt, you don't want that incision being seen. So it's easier for us just to do the entire embalming process from the femoral artery.
Whereas men are almost always in a collared shirt. Yeah,
collared shirt or even a polo, something that's a high neck rising.
Right, a bit higher.
Whereas women, if we know that the clothing is going to be able to cover the incision, then we, of course, will go ahead and use that shirt. Sometimes we can't get the interesting thing with the human body is it's got an enclosed circulatory system. Unlike a grasshopper is sloshed. So when it moves, all of the fluids move with the body in a grasshopper. But in the human body, that's why we have arteries and and vessels and capillaries. That bloodstream remains intact, and that's when people lose their lives if one of those arteries are severed or broken. So like an aneurysm, where the artery wall will lessen or weaken and then burst. And so that's people bleed internally from that all the time. Same thing happens in the brain if there's a stroke. So when we do embalmings, it's a pressurized, we use what's called a portaboy or a Duotronic, whichever. It depends on the funeral home, what machines they have available, but it is a pressurized forcing of that chemical into the vascular system. So think for a minute, if you're pushing something into the system and it's a closed system, what has to happen?
A release somewhere else?
Yeah, the release has to happen. And so the release happens through the vein. So if I'm injecting through the carotid artery, then the jugular vein, everybody knows about the jugular vein.
Right.
No one ever hears about the carotid artery.
Right.
They're so unappreciated. But the carotid artery is where the injection would take place. So that fluid is moving through the vascular system, through the carotid artery, the vein or the jugular vein at that point, it would be cut and allowed for that pressure to be released. If it's not released, think of blowing up a balloon. So if you're blowing up a balloon, the vascular system will start to expand, causing swelling. You don't want swelling. And if a person does begin to swell, then you just automatically stop and you move to the next point of injection so that you can go ahead and bypass the swell and move to the next part of the body that you need to embalm. So that's why there's 14 different points of injection. Most embalmers will usually just use the carotid because very seldom do you get blockages somewhere else unless they're on some sort of certain medications will allow that to happen. Gotcha. But the reason for that embalming to take place is what I mentioned before, temporary preservation and sanitation. Now I say temporary preservation because it does not stop the natural decomposition of a body. It'll stop the natural decomposition, but it'll
slow it, but it won't completely stop. It's not like mummifying them.
That's correct. And the reason I know that is because we've exhumed individuals from cemeteries that have been buried for 60, 70 years. And as soon as the casket's lifted, you can hear a sloshing sound. And that means that the body has released its bodily fluids.
Right.
And it's so low into the ground, cool, that very seldom will it evaporate. And caskets nowadays, man, they're pretty tight. So there's very seldom any leakage. So anyway, the embalming process is very important when it comes to preservation. There are times when people will ask to have viewings without the embalming, and that's due to a certain religion, maybe Hindu, Muslim. They hate it when bodies embalmed, or even when they're autopsy being, we can go into that a little later, but they look at that as mutilation. So they don't want that done at all to their loved one. And sometimes law dictates that it is done. So they don't have any choice. And then they always try and sue the state. They'll never win because of the circumstance of the death. Right. So with the embalming process, there's two things that you need to be aware of. Once a body has started to decompose, where the skin starts to slip, in other words, where I could take my hand and rub it up and down my arm, but when I'm rubbing my fingers on the skin pulls with it comes on with the drag, comes off with the drag. Yeah. And so once you get to that state, you can still embalm, but there's virtually really not much more you can do. I mean,
how long does it take to get to that state?
So it depends on how the individual passes away. So if a person passes away in fire, the body, now rigor mortis is a temporary state. A lot of people think it's permanent. So even nurses, when I go to pick up we're sorry, she's already in a rigor state. That'll maybe pass in an hour.
Took them out of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why you're apologizing.
Thank you for that. And why is it that bodies will lock up in a fire? Do you know?
No.
It's because of the acid. It's the fear. So the lactic acid is pushed into the blood and into the muscular tissue along with adrenaline. And when the two mix, it freezes and tightens the tissue.
Really? So
once it gets into that state, you have to break appendages in order for it. It won't lessen. They will need to be broken. So floaters or people that drown, terrible. There's virtually nothing we can do with
embalming.
With floaters. We can still do an arterial injection, but it doesn't really take much effect because the body is so waterlogged. And so it counteracts the chemicals. It dilutes it immediately when you put it in there, and you can run it over and over and over. And finally, eventually enough fluid may get out of the body, but you'll still never get a good embalming off of a floater. Right. So auto accidents, very easily done. Lead poisoning is what we call them, with stab wounds or bullets. Those are easily done as well. And again, it all depends on the time frame from the time of death to the actual embalming process itself. So that's the extent of what I'm going to talk about with embalming. Are you okay with that?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
How long does the typical embalming take you?
So typical embalming, if it's just what we call a normal case, meaning that there's been no trauma to the individual. They just died of old age or just gave up. The failure to thrive is a cause of death, believe it or not, on a death certificate. Yeah. So
on a death certificate, really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
doctors get away with placing failure to thrive.
Oh no, I'm so scared that's what they're gonna put on mine. She really just wasn't trying.
If only she thrived a little better. So anyway, on someone like that, I would say that it's about an hour and a half, maybe. If the person has been autopsied, and I guess now maybe might be a good time for explaining the autopsy, but that's where the incision is made from mid-shoulder or mid-shoulder to mid-sternum down to the pubic area. And then the entire cavity is opened up. The thoracic and abdominal cavity is opened up, and then organs are biopsied or toxicology is taken at that point. But it exposes all of the vessels. And so when that happens, there's all the sewing that needs to take place just to get the body.
You are the one that does that.
Correct.
Okay.
And so once all that sewing is done, those take 2.5 hours easily. And we're now into the process of body donation where they can take long bone, shoulders. It's not uncommon for me to see an incision from the top of the shoulder all the way down to the wrist on both arms where they've removed all the bone. And then, and then also
they donate them?
Yeah, well, either donate them or use them for a scientific research. Medical students use them to learn.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And then also on the legs, from the top of the hip bone all the way down to the dorsalis pedis, which is the top of the foot, and everything is opened, and they replace the bone with PVC pipe. Which is, I guess, is okay, but we still have to do a lot of work on that. So, but yeah, that's a good 4-hour process because of the amount of sewing that needs to be done. So
and
it
can range from
It can range from an hour to up to 5 hours, depending upon what it is you have to do.
Wow.
If you're having to rebuild features, like one of my favorite things to do is the nose, the mouth, the eyes, to rebuild them and make them so that they're like, if a person takes I don't want to be too graphic, but if someone
has a problem with their eyes,
or their face in general, the things that are going to be viewed, you have to take much more time with just to make sure that they look as reasonably normal as possible. So that can take time too, depending upon what trauma you might see on the face.
Right. And I will say that, because I know you won't, but you are one of the best embalmers, I'd say, easily in the state, at least in the state.
Thank you.
You are renowned.
I would agree. I've been called, well, we don't need to go into all that, but yeah.
Wait, you've been called what? Did you have a name?
No, I've been called to different states to embalm.
Oh, really? You've been called out because
to embalm individuals. Yeah. Because
I mean, I remember even gunshot wound victims to the face and head, you can still manage to have an open casket with the work that you do.
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah, it's very impressive.
I spent 16 hours on one individual.
Oh my gosh.
And the one complaint, and I'll tell you what, I had to rebuild half the guy's face.
Yeah.
And the one complaint that the lady, his wife, had, still had an open casket, but her complaint was, I don't think he smiled like that. His mouth doesn't look normal. Oh, but
if I could show you his mouth 16 hours ago, I think
his whole face. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Oh my heck. Wow.
Anyway, so yeah, that's the way it goes, I guess. Whatever.
Yeah, I guess.
I need a drink. 16 hours and you're telling me the mouth doesn't look right?
Oh my gosh. Oh wow.
Is there anything you can do with the mouth? Oh boy. Well, if only. Yeah, I guess I can.
Oh.
Let me
Yeah, do you want me to undo what I did?
let me just put a little pressure here.
Right.
There, that looks much better. Anyway, well. So since we're talking about embalming, this episode I want to call Pitter Patter. And I think you'll understand why as I go through the course of the episode. So one particular firm that I worked for, and I have to give you a little bit of a breakdown as far as how the movement or the flow of the building was. So you understand a little bit more completely about what's happening. So when you walk in to this particular building, to the left was the chapel. To the front, if you continued walking forward, you would see the office area. If you continued walking through the office, there would be a back hallway. You'd open the doorway, you'd turn to the right, and you just continue on. And then it would go ahead, and the first door on the right would be the prep room or the embalming room. Mm-hmm. And if you kept right on going, it would circle you around like a horseshoe and bring you back to the lobby area.
Okay.
So that's, if you've got the mental picture, I'll go ahead and begin with the story.
Hold on. Is this the story part?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Are you kidding me?
What?
You didn't let me say what time it is.
Sorry, Holly. Let's
oh
go
my
back.
Gosh. That's like my one job on this podcast. I know I forgot last week, but I will not stand to be forgotten.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
So anyways, what time is it?
I don't know.
Time to be frank.
Thanks, Holly.
Okay, now continue.
Wow. All right. So there you've got the layout of the building, right? That's still clear and fresh in your mind. Okay.
Yeah.
So let me go back a little bit before the actual occurrence happens. I had a manager, general manager. I was the manager of the funeral home at the time. But the general manager of the facility had a granddaughter that would come in with him every once in a while, and she was wheelchair bound, and they weren't expecting her to live too much longer. That's about the extent I knew of it. Mm-hmm. And so I would talk to him briefly, and he would say, "Hey, Frank, tell me about this family that you just helped, or that's being embalmed, or that's been embalmed, and who's up for viewing right now." So I'd walk into the chapel and I'd have this conversation with him, and there was his granddaughter with him the entire time. Mm-hmm. And he would look at me and he'd go, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you were like this one particular person." He had, again, committed suicide, gunshot to the temple of the head. And he could not believe that there was no indication of a gunshot wound at all. And
right,
so
in the viewing.
Right. And so there was a couple of times where he would just say that, just make comments like that with regard to the
How
embalming.
Did you do that?
Yeah, exactly. With regards to the embalming process, and that the individual looked serene.
Right.
So now let's flash forward. I get a call from him about probably after this occurrence, maybe about a month and a half. And he says, "Frank, I need your help." And I said, "Sure. What can I help you with?" I almost said his name. Whoa. And I don't want to use names. And so he said, "My granddaughter passed away." And I just went really quiet. And then I said, "Well, is this the granddaughter I met?" Mm-hmm. And he goes, "Yes." And I said, "Oh my gosh, I am so sorry. Were you with her when she passed away?" Mm-hmm. And he said, "She and I were inseparable. I was with her." Oh. And I said, "Okay, so let me get dressed and I'll come over to the house and we'll just bring her into our care." And so.
Oh, so this was a first call. She had just passed away.
Yes. So I made it to his house, and there she was, crippled up, just lying on a bed. And I'd never seen her on the bed. I always saw her in a wheelchair, but she was almost in an embryo position. And so easily lifted. She probably weighed 70 pounds.
Right.
And she was 13 or 14 years old. And so I just easily lifted her and put her on the gurney or the cot stretcher. Mm-hmm. And then said some had just brief conversation with my boss and his wife, and then moved her onto the mortuary. He asked that I embalm her quickly. And so I just thought, oh, okay, so what if it's 10:30, 11 o'clock, whatever.
Right.
But I still put it off because the next day I have to have a signature for an embalming to occur. And he didn't give me one. So I waited. And then when he got into the office, I went over and I was able to secure his signature for that embalming to take place. And I said, now listen, I have a fairly busy day, but she will be embalmed today. And he said, I'd like to see her as soon as that has been accomplished. I said, okay, no problem. So the day progressed on and on and on. And quite truthfully, I was so busy. By the time it came 5 o'clock, I'll say whatever family it was that evening was having a viewing. And so I went on ahead and I made sure that everything was set up and ready for the viewing. And then I remembered,
you have to embalm.
I have to embalm this little girl. And so I just walked to the back and I removed her from the refrigeration area and I put her on the embalming table and I started the paperwork and I just wanted to give her a moment to thaw. I don't know how, go to warm room temperature.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Warm up.
But warm up because it's a lot easier because once a body is warm, everything seems to be more relaxed.
It's going to go a lot.
Yeah. So during that time, and so I went on ahead and I made the incision. I knew that she was going to be dressed in. So I used the carotid artery for the embalming process. And during the embalming process, I could hear laughter and joking and the
from
microphone.
The service?
Yeah, the microphone being used from the service, which was not far, but I thought far enough that I wouldn't be able to hear it, but I did hear it quite well. And it always makes me smile when I hear laughter and loud conversation in a funeral.
At a funeral.
Because that just means the first three words of a funeral are what? F-U-N, fun.
Fun.
And so I always want I always want to make sure that people are comfortable at funerals. And so whatever happens, whatever gets people to talk about the individual, whatever makes them laugh, that just means they're remembering good thoughts about the individual.
Yeah, that's what you want.
That's
ideally
what I want.
from a funeral.
So here I was embalming and I'm hearing the loud voices are speaking and then the laughter, and I just couldn't help but smile. I just thought, okay, good. They're enjoying themselves. Things are happening the way it should. I'm deviating just a little bit, but I think it's important to insert here. Do you know what a casket means in French?
No.
Or the casket is derived from a French word. I don't know what the French word is, but it's jewelry box.
Oh, really?
So when you think about individuals being placed in caskets for burial or for viewing, you're actually putting something in a jewelry box, quote unquote, of value, something of value.
Wow.
Is being on display. And
that's
so
I
always like to remember that. So anyway, that being said.
Something precious to you.
Yes. And so anyway, my mind was kind of focused on their laughter and their occurrence or their experiences that they were sharing with each other regarding the deceased.
Right.
It was about as I was finishing the embalming process and I was just sewing up this little girl. The incision. When I say sewing up, I mean just the incisions.
Just the incision,
for the embalming
just
process.
a little stitch.
And I do something interesting during embalming. I like to look at faces and I like to see if I can imagine what may have been going on in this person's life. It's very interesting when you get an older person, you get all sorts of wrinkles. And you just wonder, what caused all the wrinkles? I mean, besides age, something else, could be worry, could be a troubled life. Anyway.
Could be smile wrinkles.
Could be. You're exactly right.
Wrinkles.
Yep. That's what's going to happen with my face. And so
yours is just going to be plastered on.
that is correct. Okay, that is correct. So anyway, I was looking at this little girl's face and I knew a little bit about her history, which isn't common.
Right.
Very seldom
that you had even met her.
That's right. So I did know a little bit about her history. And so I thought to myself, you know what? You are truly in a better place.
Yes.
And then I just left it. I just calm as I could be. And I continued sewing. And then something happened. Behind the doorway in the back hallway, I started to hear someone skipping. And then a little bit of a hum of a tune. And I thought to myself, I got a little angry and I thought, why don't parents watch their kids during viewing?
Right. Even how did they even get back here?
Yeah. And it's not only the parents, but we have viewing directors that are in the building that are watching a viewing. How could you let a child into that?
Slip past.
Yeah, exactly right. And so I just thought, that's silly. And so finally it just went away. It just stopped. And I thought, oh, good. They made their way back to the family.
Found their way back
to the family and where they should be.
Right.
And then I moved this little girl onto what's called a dressing table, because I knew that she would be dressed probably the early next morning. And so I moved her to a dressing table, and then I sat at the desk finishing up my paperwork. And it was during that time that I was working on my paperwork, I heard again, not skipping, but a little pitter patter of feet. And I opened the door. I hurried and got up, and I opened the door, and I was so ready to say, hey, you shouldn't be back here.
Hey,
go back to your parents. Hey, come on, move it.
Come on. What are you doing?
And so I looked left and I looked right, and I didn't see anybody.
And this was just the long hallway.
Yeah.
You said it was like a horseshoe layout and you were at the back?
Yeah. If I go through the office again, through that second door, turn to the right, there's the embalming room about midway down the hallway. And the hallway probably was 100 feet. So it was down halfway. And so I expected, when I looked 50 feet down the left, 50 feet down to the right, there was nothing.
Right. You should be able to see someone if you just heard them outside the door.
Correct.
There's no place for them to go.
That's right. And so I went on ahead and I did one thing further. I left the embalming room and I walked around the corner to where the horseshoe began, if I'm looking at the layout of the building. So I turned that corner thinking that she was sitting right there waiting. Oh, I stirred him up. I got him going.
Hiding.
Hiding. And so there was still no one there. And I thought, am I imagining things?
Right.
That's exactly what I thought. Am I imagining things? So I did. So I went back into the prep room, and I usually will close the door behind me, because when you're embalming, it's a private,
very private. Yes.
Private episode that's happening between you and the deceased. Now, let's take a short note here. There are times when family members, if they request to see the embalming, they can see the embalming.
You're kidding.
No. And if medical personnel comes in, and we'll talk about this too in another podcast, why medical personnel is important. But if medical personnel request to be there as well, they legally have the right to be there. I left the door open, went back to the table, and started doing it. And lo and behold, I heard that pitter patter once again. And now at this point, I just sat back in my chair, rolled it around, and I just waited to see if someone.
I know they're going to run past the door.
That's exactly was my thought. I thought to myself, they're going to run past the door, and I'm going to see them, and I'll get up real fast, and I may just scare the heck out of them so they don't do this again.
Right.
But I was the one blown away. And the reason I say that is because as I was sitting there looking in the doorway, a little girl walked into the door and walked into the room and was probably one of the most beautiful, tranquil children I had ever seen in my life. And as I just sat there, I couldn't say anything. I didn't want to say, hey, you shouldn't be in here, or you need to go back to your parents, whatever the case might be. And while I was thinking in my mind what was transpiring, she walked over to the table and she looked at this little girl that I had just embalmed. And then she looked at me and she said, I look beautiful. And immediately I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I'm in the presence of this little girl. Now, be that as it may, think about it, what it is you want to think about. It doesn't really matter to me. I know what I happened to see and what I experienced. And then she said something to me to relay to her grandpa. And so I'll just share it with you. I wasn't going to, but I will. She said, "Tell Poppy that I'm okay and that I'm very happy." And so, and then she just turned around and walked back out. And I heard the footprints or the footsteps again. And I just sat there in awe about what I had just seen. And so the next day when I saw my boss, he said, "Hey, how did things go last night with my granddaughter?" I said, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" And I just pulled him to the side and I explained to him kind of what I just explained to you, Holly, about what had transpired. And I said, "And she wanted me to give you a message." And he said, "Oh my gosh, what is it?" And I said, "Let me see if I can remember. Poppy." And then I repeated back the message as it was told to me. And he looked at me and he said, "You must have talked to her. That was her word for me. Poppy."
Oh, really?
No one
Poppy.
else calls me Poppy. None of my other grandkids ever called me Poppy. And so I just looked at him and I said, "I just want you to know that she's happy."
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was important for her to tell you that because you guys were inseparable.
Right.
And so she didn't want you to feel bad that she had passed or that she had gone somewhere else, but she wanted you to know that she was happy. Mm-hmm. And so the downside of the story, if you can think of a downside, it would be this.
Right.
He chose to share that with his daughter, the child's
her mother,
mm-hmm. who didn't have a good relationship with her at all. And she got mad that, number one, why would you get that message and not me? Oh. That's kind of the same feeling or thought that my boss looked at her and he just said, "I don't know. The message remains the message. It doesn't matter who receives it.
It's the same.
Yeah, the message is the same. You're missing the point. She's happy.
This is a message of hope."
Exactly right. And she's happy. And then he said, and the embalmer said that he heard her singing. Yeah. And so she, her limited.
And she skipping.
Was limited. Exactly.
When she was in a wheelchair.
Walk. She couldn't walk and her voice or her ability to speak was limited. So I'll leave that story right there and just leave it to you to understand or maybe think about a little bit further as far as how that could reflect upon you and what's going on in your own lives and how it could be effective or at least how someone else's ailment. I just feel bad when I look at someone in a wheelchair and I just think, how can I help them? And sometimes the only help you can give them is to listen. And just whether you know it or not, maybe just the ability to just sit there and talk to them or even listen to what they're saying is the best therapy that they could receive. So anyway, be that as it may, I just want you to know that there are opportunities if we take them. And I don't know why. And you'll hear this again. There's 3 other stories I'm going to tell you that people came to me and gave me messages for family. And It was so odd to me that the same reaction that was received by this mother is the same thing they said to me. Why would they come to you?
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I always think that maybe the reason why is because I was more in tune because I like to look at the face, remember?
Right.
So I'm focused on her. So I'm focused on her as opposed to, oh my gosh, tomorrow I got to do this, and this.
Right.
And I'm thinking sometimes maybe a loved one of someone who's just recently passed away is too occupied with other thoughts than the person that's just passed away. So
yeah. And then when they get that message, it becomes almost a competition sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Well, why did they come to you?
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
So anyway, any comments, Holly, on that one?
I have a lot of comments. I just don't know what to say. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think it's a beautiful story.
It's, again, these are so, and I guess indelible into my spirit, into my soul. I don't know if I'm saying that word
Right.
correctly, but I could recount them as soon as someone says, "What about pitter patter?" Let's talk
Yep.
about pitter patter.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm happy to.
I remember it like it was
Yeah,
yesterday.
exactly right. And right now, where I sit at today, this occurrence happened 28 years ago.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
And it's still just as fresh in your mind as ever
Still
was.
just as fresh in my mind. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, do you have anything else you want to say, Holly?
I don't know. I think that's just incredible. I think that's something that's going to be with them forever.
Mm-hmm. And I always wondered if the mother would be judged, or if a family member is ever held accountable for the way that there's certain things in life you don't spit at.
Right.
And something like this, and even though I call it a spiritual experience, I feel in my mind people can learn from this experience, even though to me it became a very sacred spiritual experience. There's a reason why it happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I can, again, we bounce right back from the last episode, or one of the episodes where we were talking about hope. There's hope. There's hope.
Yeah.
People, come on. There's hope out there.
Yeah, there is.
Even for me, when I get to my lowest point possible, and I've been there, I just think, you know what? There's more that you can actually focus on, things that are more important than what is transpiring in your life at that given moment. So, wow. I didn't think I'd become emotional about this one, but there it is.
Yeah, I didn't either, but.
So anyway. So anyway. Whew, okay, good.
Yeah, story time.
Tell me another.
Time to be frank was hit different this week.
Oh man, now I'm gonna have a runny nose.
I know.
Runny eyes.
Oh
man. My eyes are sweating again. Darn it.
Oh shoot. You gotta get that checked out.
Oh my gosh. So anyway, I just want you to know that, again, I appreciate anyone that might be listening to the podcast now. If you feel like you want to share it with other people, please do, because there's a lot of, we're still going to have a lot of fun. There's funny things that we want to share with you that are nothing like what we've just experienced. That is very funny. And I just think you should be aware of all aspects.
Right. There's something for everyone here. What
the mortician goes through. I think most, I don't know if most will admit to it or not. Maybe. Anyway, I'm actually honored to be
a part of it.
Exactly. And I always think to myself, after everything is over and said and done, what am I learning from this? Why was I part of it? Yeah. So it becomes very important for me to know and understand that as well.
Yeah, and I think that's evident in just the fact that you can still remember them clear as day. 2 decades later.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, going back to her mother, I think probably, I'd bet that she probably cherishes that now. And in her grief, she reacted badly, but now knowing that and saying that was a petty thing for me to say, but I'm glad I have that knowledge that my daughter is happy.
Yeah.
Where she's at.
Yeah. I agree with you. And all I can hope is that is true. That she does in fact have some reflective responsibility in saying, you know what, you're right. I missed the message. Right.
I missed the mark on that one.
And that's essentially what it is the message. In life, we're given messages every single day. Yeah. And we get mad by the way it's delivered. We get mad that it hasn't been delivered on time.
Who delivers it?
Exactly. But the message doesn't change. It doesn't change anything. It's the message that you need to hear, not the way it's delivered, not for who delivers it.
Exactly. Yeah. So
anyway.
Again, what we were saying, we just need to put our own circumstances aside and focus on what am I supposed to learn? What is the message that is being delivered to me through this?
Yeah, I agree. So anyway, listen, for those of you that are listening, we have some fun things that are coming up. We'll announce them later, but I think there'll be some contests that we're going to start incorporating and hopefully have some fun with that as well. So,
yes, absolutely. Sorry we got weepy on you, but
what? Who got weepy?
What do you mean?
This old body doesn't weep. Come on. Wasn't it Tom Hanks that said, "There's no crying in baseball"?
There's no crying in baseball.
Oh, that's right. We're not in baseball. Wow. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I don't think anyone could say there's no crying in death. I'm not sure that would be a valid argument.
Yeah. You know what? Oh my gosh. Yeah. And you'll remember this statement. Do what you want with him. I don't care.
Oh, yeah.
And so there's a podcast that we'll base on that one as well. And it's not all, sometimes it's sickening.
Yeah.
So
sometimes it is. It's just.
Yeah. Anyway.
You remember the good, but also experience the bad. Choose to remember the good, but.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyway, but I don't know if it's because I have a mind like a steel trap. Hold on, what did I?
Are we sure? Wait, where's my phone?
Did I?
Wait a second.
Where's my
phone?
Where's my keys?
Where did I park?
These are all so true.
Right. Can't get anything past me.
Oh my gosh. Oh well. Anyway. Okay. So look for the next one, and it'll be it'll be
join us next week.
Next one. Yep, it'll also be an interesting one, and then we'll maybe make it a little lighter.
Yeah.
Than what the first 4 or 5 have been.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Okay.
We'll get you laughing instead of crying next time.
That's right. That's right.
But as always, thank you all for joining us. And that was this week's Coffin Talkin. Join us again next week for more stories with Frank.
Thanks, Holly.
Yeah, of course.
Love you. All right. Bye.
Bye.